So hello everyone and welcome. Really pleased to see a good few of you along to the webinar this morning. The purpose of today is to give a bit of an overview of the application process and some of the detail you might be looking for around applying to phase 2 of Connecting Scotland. Format for today is I'll give a bit of an overview of the process for phase 2. And we'll have some opportunity for questions and answers at the end. And we've got a panel of people joining us today that includes Katie McNeill, who's the Programme Director for Connecting Scotland based in Scottish Government. We have David McNeill from SCVO, who's Director of Development. We have Alan Aitken from COSLA, who's Head of Health and Social Care Policy. And we will have Eileen from Children First, who participated in some of our pilot work around Connecting Scotland, and have some reflections on the process and the benefits for their users. So just to kick off, I'll just give you a bit of a run through of some of the information we have and some of the process. Getting the slides working. So phase 2, we launched phase 2 on the 18th of August. Phase 2 of Connecting Scotland, aiming to connect up to 23,000 households who are digitally excluded at the moment. In terms of what's provided, some of you will be familiar with this, some of you may well have been through phase 1 of Connecting Scotland, but the offer is basically access to kit, so either an iPad or a Chromebook. Access to connectivity, and that's provided through a mobile Wi-Fi device or a MiFi with the plan is to offer unlimited data, subject to fair usage cap, of course, and support to develop skills and confidence online. So that's through digital champions training for the workforce, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a little minute. So the programme, kind of building on existing learning, we'll be working through trusted organisations in the voluntary sector and the public sector, primarily local authorities, to be able to help us reach the people that we want to reach within the programme and to be able to target the interventions at those that would benefit most from it. The eligibility criteria. So the eligibility criteria has changed from phase 1. In phase 1, we had a focus on the clinically higher risk to coronavirus as a direct response to the pandemic and lockdown. In phase 2, we're looking at moving more towards households with children where a child's normally resident, and that includes pregnant women or young care leavers up to the age of 26. So they're kind of the thematic focus for phase 2, along with the other criteria around being digitally excluded. So that's individuals that either don't have access to an internet-enabled device, don't have an internet connection at home, or don't have skills and confidence to be able to get best use of the internet, and also in a low income, so they couldn't otherwise afford to pay for a device or internet access at home. I suppose one of the queries we get quite often is around validation of data. So there's no kind of official validation process for the criteria. We do trust organisations applying just to make that assessment themselves. So it's not means tested in terms of low income. It's whether, as an organisation, you know that that person otherwise couldn't afford to be online. Just to give you a bit of a flavour of the application process and what to expect in kind of the weeks and months ahead. So at the moment, the applications are open. You can apply online through connecting.scot. It is an online application process. And in that application, we'll ask you to outline the digital needs of the people, how many of them you've identified and how you plan to support them. So it is an expectation that when you're making an application, you do have a number in mind of how many people you're able to support, rather than just doing a kind of blanket application for, say, 50 devices. So we will be looking for that. You have until 11 AM on the 5th of October to submit that application. And when you submit that, you will get a kind of auto response and a PDF copy of your application sent to you, so you can keep that for future reference. Soon after that deadline, ourselves and SCVO, as part of the Connecting Scotland team, will work with representatives from each of the local authority areas to assess applications. And it's really good for us to be able to work in partnership with local governments to be able to kind of localise that support a bit more and draw on some of that knowledge on a more local level as well. After we've assessed it, we will start communicating the decisions by the 2nd of November. So that usually means successful organisations would get an email from us and a DocuSign electronic contract. So no paper involved. You can sign that contract electronically. And again, some of you are maybe familiar with that and have been through that for phase 1. After that, we begin a distribution process. So we start to get the devices and the MiFi sent out kind of from November onwards. And of course, with any kind of large-scale distribution thing, there are variables in there, but the plan is from November onwards, the devices would start to go out. And at that point, digital champions would also receive training, which we would provide remotely. Then it's up over to you guys. So successful organizations would then start to distribute the devices and the MiFis to the end users. We do ask that you try and get this done within 30 days of receiving the devices, just so that they can go out quite quickly to people that need them. And then once that's delivered, then ongoing support through your digital champions for 6 months. I mentioned there that we work with local governments. So we, in our team, assess the applications with reps from each local authority area. There's kind of an indicative number of devices allocated per local authority area, which means we've got kind of a good geographical spread for the program across the country. And it also means we can tap into some of those expertise on a local level as well. A kind of practical point, I think, probably just to flag with anyone interested in applying, is that the application process is per local authority area. So if you are a slightly larger organization or national organization, you can download a Word version of the application just to create it, but you would have to then submit individual applications online for each local authority area that you're applying for, with a breakdown of the specific numbers for that area. The application form itself, just kind of based on some queries that we get, we thought it's just important to flag that you don't need to submit a list of individual people's names at application stage. That's not information that we need or want to take from you during the application process. But what you do need to show is how you'll identify and choose those people that you're going to support. So one of the things we're quite keen to see is that you do have that reach and those relationships with people that meet the criteria for the programme. And also that you've got a good understanding of what their specific needs are around digital inclusion. And then a kind of other key thing is that you have the capacity within the organisation, or at least the ability to form partnerships locally to provide digital champion support on an ongoing basis, so that people are supported to use their new devices properly. Just on the digital champions, so we have on the Connecting Scotland website quite a bit of resource now around digital champions, and that includes some information on anyone who's thinking of becoming a digital champion. So if you're a manager or you've got the lead for Connecting Scotland, it might be a good place to signpost some staff to think about who your digital champions might be. But essentially it's anyone in a front-facing role, anyone that has those kind of day-to-day interactions with end users. You don't need to be IT gurus or from your IT department. It's far better that there are people that have those pre-existing relationships with the people that you want to get your devices to, so that you can build on that trust that you've got with them. But yeah, no need at all for them to be digital gurus. And then just in terms of what we as a programme ask kind of in return as part of Connecting Scotland. So the first thing, as I say, is about identifying your staff or volunteers to be the digital champions to provide the support. That onward distribution, so we will ship the devices to your organisation, and then we ask that you're then able to pass those devices on an individual basis to the end users. We also ask for some data to be collected, which helps us with our evaluation processes as well. So that's kind of contact details and individual details of people getting the devices. We'll also ask for a baseline survey that essentially your digital champions will be able to do with the end users just as they're getting their device, just to understand what the starting point is for them around their digital skills and confidence and internet use. We also ask you to provide 6 months ongoing support and share any case studies with us. We do like to see good impact stories and see some of the difference it can make for people's lives. As a programme, we will have our own evaluation approach and do some sampling at different intervals throughout the programme. So there's not a report and evaluation form to fill in as such, which a lot of people are probably used to with funding programmes. But most of that information and some more you can get on the website, which is connecting.scot, and there's a for organisations section, and there's some frequently asked questions as well. But I suppose the purpose of today is just to kind of give you a flavour of some of that process, but also to open it up for any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now, and I see Eileen's joined us from Children First too as part of our panel. And I think probably before we open up for questions, Eileen, if I could just invite you just to say a few words of kind of key reflections on, obviously Children First were involved in some of the early pilot work around Connecting Scotland, and the service user group that you guys work with is a really good reflection of who we're trying to target in phase 2. So just see if you had any key reflections.
Hi there. Sorry, I had some trouble joining today. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yeah. Right, so Children First works with children families across Scotland, and we were really excited to get involved in the pilot of this because we'd been hearing back from families very early on in lockdown about the challenges that they were having keeping connected, not just to schoolwork, but for the parents keeping connected to their social networks as well. And the sense of isolation that they were feeling with that. So in terms of logistics, we used a Microsoft form to gather the information from across all of our services. And that was really good for us because it meant there wasn't a lot of paperwork flying about, which none of us really needed early on in lockdown. We made the decision to coordinate the allocation of devices centrally. So we got everything delivered to one place, and our IT team then created packs for each family. So we would put in the Chromebooks and MiFi devices along with any paperwork and guidance, so that a family, when they were getting it, would have everything they needed to get started, and we weren't sending them things out in bits and pieces. It was really useful as well for us to be able to do that centrally, because it meant that we could log all of the asset numbers and ID numbers that we needed to for the devices, to make sure that we had them allocated to the right families, because that's something that I know that is needed later on in order to be able to provide support for the devices if there was anything that goes wrong with them in the future. So what we then did, we had a staff member in each area who acted as a local distributor. So we would send the bulk packs out to them, and then they were responsible for making sure that other people in their area, either staff got devices to hand on, or they were delivering them directly to families themselves. And that sort of delivery, along with a discussion about the terms and conditions and the fact that it was the circumstances under which they were getting the devices, was really useful. Also meant that we could check in if there were any families who maybe had some anxieties about using devices, to make sure that we weren't just handing them something and then walking away. So the digital champions training that we went through was really good for staff as well, which meant that they were confident about having these discussions quite often on doorsteps, just to make sure that people knew how to get their device connected and use a MiFi device if they were getting one of these as well. I'd say that some families needed a bit of help, but actually the vast majority were probably telling us how to do it. So I think it was actually, I don't think digital skills was overall a major issue. There was maybe just a couple that they needed that extra support. In terms of learnings, I think because we were the pilot, we were starting from scratch with a lot of the guidance and paperwork and contracts, and I think that took a bit more time than we thought, but I presume that you'll have all of that to build on for this next phase, so that's great. I think we didn't realise that specific MiFi devices were matched to specific SIM cards, so we ended up playing this huge jigsaw game on the floor where we had to match them all up. That's something that I don't know if you're handing out data as part of this phase of it, but that's certainly something to keep in mind, because it was actually quite time consuming. There's been very few issues with the devices. I think we've only had one support issue. I think in the main people are getting on with it, and we're starting to get really great feedback back. Families where they've been using mobile phones to do their homework. One mobile phone with a cracked screen, I think, was being used to do homework. So I think it's been great to be getting the feedback that we have. Also talking about where it's not just about children connecting with school, excuse me, but also one of the Chromebooks that was handed out has meant that a parent can join a college course that she wasn't going to be able to access otherwise. So I think there's benefits across the whole family. So it's not just, even though we might have identified it's been used for a child in the family, I think they've proven to be useful for the whole family unit. I think that's probably about everything that I've got. I'm happy to answer any questions. And also happy if anybody's wanting to connect up with Children First and just find out a bit more about how we went through the process. I'm really happy to have individual contacts from organisations as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Eileen. Probably helpful to open up for questions, but just before I do, I don't know, Alan, David or Katie, if either any of you have anything you want to add just now, or do you want to just go into questions? And I will take silences.
Yeah, happy to go to questions, I think.
Yeah, open up the questions.
Brilliant. Okay, so anyone that's got a question, you can either pop it in the chat pane or just give me a little hands up emoji reaction, and I'll ask you just to come off mute and ask your question. Kerry Spence.
Hiya, sorry, I'm on a mobile phone, so I'm not sure quite how to work this. But I'll take my hand down in a minute. Do we have details of the allocation per local authority?
So that's one for me. Hi, I'm Katie from Scottish Government, a Programme Director for Connecting Scotland. So actually what we've done in phase 1, there was a specific allocation for each local authority. In phase 2, because it's larger and also a different user group, what we've been working on is actually not an allocation of a specific number, but a likely range for each local authority. So it will be just because we know, for example, we didn't know where people who were shielding or at risk from COVID was. We thought they were probably spread fairly evenly around Scotland, whereas we know a bit more about the low income families and young care leavers. So it's a really quite a wide range. I've put a floor of 100 devices in each area, but then it can go up quite high from that. And you have just reminded me that I need to have a chat with Alan Aitken, who's also on this call with me, just to close that off. So thank you, Kerry, for that question.
Yeah, and I suppose we don't expect, so we've got 23,000 devices. Sorry, it's David McNeil from SEVO here. 23,000 devices for phase 2. We, in this first round of applications, I think we don't necessarily expect to give them all out in this first round of applications. It's likely that, so we won't hit, we'd be surprised if we exceeded the demand for a local authority area than in this first stage. So apply for as many as you think is practical to get out.
Okay, and you can then say if you're wanting iPads or Chromebooks, because I'm presuming the Chromebooks this time round will go faster than the iPads, whereas last time, with the people that we were giving to in phase 1, it seemed to be the iPads.
Yeah, we've got. I mean, we're kind of balancing it. We've got slightly more allocation of Chromebooks available this time. So nationally, I think we've got about 50-50 iPads and Chromebooks. And it worked out the last time that the level of request for iPads and Chromebooks were roughly what we had ordered. So unfortunately, we need to place the orders well in advance of actually knowing what people request. But so request what you would like.
I think the only thing I would add to that is on that specific question about district allocation was that, as mentioned in the first phase, we used what we call GE, which is a tried and tested way of distributing allocation across local authorities, which covers a whole range of indicators and factors, and is one that we've used quite a lot. So as mentioned, that'll be slightly different this time round. However, there's a significant amount of thought that has gone into the best way of allocating across local authorities.
Thanks, Alan. I've got some questions in the chat pane, but I also see a hand up as well from Paddy. So I'll come to you first.
Hi folks, I'm Paddy McKenna. I'm the Community Team Coordinator at Castleton Housing. This is a question for Eileen. What you said about the MiFi devices and SIM card has literally put the fear of God into me, as we're about to give out 120 of those devices as part of our digital lending library. I don't know if this is more a conversation individually for after, but it might benefit other folk. At what point did you realise that, and is there anything that makes that obvious for those of us that are a bit digitally illiterate ourselves?
I think we were about 20 devices in, just putting random SIM cards in when we realised it. So there was a little bit of unpicking. But I think it's probably fairly obvious if you're thinking about it. It's just because we had, we were trying to do things quickly. So really just a giant jigsaw puzzle, I'm afraid, trying to put them all out and match them all up.
Okay, because I'm pretty sure it's the same contractor that we've used, that Connecting Scotland have used, so I don't know if anyone knows how to see which ones.
So
I can maybe cover that in that. So we use Vodafone, and I think there's been O2 stuff as well. Mm-hmm. The information that goes out with the Vodafone packing, the packing note that goes in with the Vodafone stuff hooks up a SIM card to or links a SIM card and a MiFi device. Actually, the most important thing is we know which number the SIM card effectively goes to which individual, which phone number they've got. You can, I believe, put the SIM cards in whatever device that you want. We only figured out recently that the packing information, the packing information from Vodafone implies that you have to link a specific number up to a specific device. But that we only found out that wasn't actually the case. So recently.
This was an occasion when we should have just not read the instructions.
Okay, thanks. That's made me a bit calmer. Thank you.
I was going to have a read of some of the questions in the chat pane. So first one from Audrey. Is there a way to find out if other organisations in the local authority area are applying to avoid duplication of efforts?
I've added some wee notes in at the bottom just for people to read, but Lorraine, you've asked a question about the data limit, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if maybe that's a question for David in the hot seat. So Lorraine's asked David, it's unlimited data for 12 months subject to fair usage cap, and she's asked what is the usage cap and how has it worked out?
So yeah, phase 2 is planned for unlimited, and actually it says 12 months online, but we think we're able to stretch to 2 years. So that's still to be confirmed. So the stuff that was on the website was being cautious. But yeah, unlimited data. Theoretically, the fair usage cap is 200 gigabytes. However, on the phase 1 people that have been on, there's some phase 1 people that have been on unlimited, including those ones with Children First. Somebody has hit 1 terabyte for a month and not got cut off. So so there's a fair usage cap that gives them the option to cancel it. That 200 gigabyte is suggested, but we know people have gone over it without trouble. So I think it was only if there was mass abuse across the system that we would start to see problems. So actually, the fair usage cap is in there, I think, is just a get out clause, assuming that lots of people start abusing it. So I don't think it's a practical issue.
I think on that, David, Vodafone have told us that we've got a special tariff which is just for Connecting Scotland customers, and that they have said it's truly unlimited. However, I do imagine that yes, if people start hitting, everyone's hitting a terabyte, that it may not be in practice. And certainly the programme for government announcement, which was made by the First Minister on the 1st of September, he committed us to keep people supplied with data for 24 months, and to move those customers who have been on phase one at the end of the year, to move them onto an unlimited plan if that's what's needed for the second year. But yeah, as David says, we're just working through all the details about how that will need to be work and be set up in practice. But yes, it certainly looks like we're able to both expand the amount of data and the length of time that people will have it for.
Thanks for that. I'm going to pick up on the question Audrey asked around, it was around duplication of effort around the application phase. I suppose I'll kick off the answers for that, Audrey, and that's as part of the reason why we assess with reps from each local authority areas as well, because they'll have an insight to kind of the reach and engagement of some of the groups that are applying. So that's kind of our initial check. Where there is, I think, fear of duplication, what we know from phase one is that people have been quite honest, which is nice if they've already had a device from another organisation, and made that clear where organisations might have an overlap of service users. And I don't know if everyone's had a look at the Champion, but just I know Claire's answered quite a few of these questions, but there was a question around minimum number of devices. So there's no minimum number that you can apply for. And in terms of if there are issues that digital champions are unable to solve, would there be additional support? And again, Claire's answered that in the chat, and it's just to flag that yes, you can email our help desk, and one of our team will help the digital champion try and resolve that query. And we've also got a digital skill support helpline that people know how are operating and managing on our behalf as well, to help users and digital champions if necessary too. And as part of I suppose the comms that'll come out with phase two for successful organisations, we'll have a bit of a journey map for organisations, so you know kind of where to go for each part of support that you might need. There's a question specifically here as well for Eileen. You're really in the hot seat today, Eileen.
That's okay.
How many devices did you give out, and what was the time commitment needed by staff? And that's kind of overall time commitment, including sorting devices, capturing equipment, giving them out.
Oh, that's a really good one. So we had 100 devices in total, but we actually ended up sending out more parcels because we had some situations where people had devices but not data. So we had a discussion with you guys, and it was agreed that we could send out the MiFi unit separately. So I would say it was probably a solid week of work in terms of getting everything registered, asset tracked, getting all the packages done and sent out. But it was a much lighter commitment from our frontline staff in terms of handing out, because everything was there when they got it. So it was really just a case of connecting up with the family. So it was probably all this sort of the work, if you like, was done centrally in terms of the packaging, the tracking, and sending out.
Thanks, Eileen. Another question we have from Joe: if people have a device but no internet, can we request MiFi only?
We've got the same number of devices as MiFi. And what we've agreed in phase one is sometimes they find actually generally overall, people apply for less MiFi than devices because they knew some people did have home access to internet at home. So they're effectively across the whole program, there are some spare MiFi. So you could apply for more MiFi devices than laptops or iPads, and it would be considered. I just think we couldn't do that at a really, really large scale. So if it's in the dozen, the kind of half a dozen or a dozen, again, that would be fine. It would probably balance out, but we can't commit to, if somebody put in an application for 100 MiFi only, for example, then I don't think we could commit to doing that.
Yeah, because we were able to help some people get devices, but struggled to get them MiFi. So there's some people we know who've got devices, but can't make full use of them until they get the MiFi. But would you say put in the request and then you'll just tell us how many you can spare?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if we get a lot of feedback that that's happening a lot, the Programme for Government did commit to a sort of third phase of Connecting Scotland. So it might be something, if we understand that picture, that we're able to resolve in the further phase. So it would definitely be good to understand where that's happening.
For this phase, though, it's difficult to predict in advance exactly what the balance is going to be. We can estimate the number of people we can support and the capacity we've got to do that, and the capacity of partners to do that. So surely it's round numbers anyway that people are going to ask for, and in practice it comes that some people need only MiFi and some people need a device but not MiFi. Then surely what we do is allocate and report back that that's the way it went.
Yeah, that's happened in phase one, that they've gone to give them the whole package, and they've then, somebody has got a laptop and then they've reallocated the MiFi device somewhere else. We would rather not have the MiFi back, for example. Unless it's not going to be used at all, I'd rather go to someone that's in need, and we know there is that need. Data poverty is an issue. So.
Brilliant. Paddy, I don't know if that's your hand still up from the last one or if that's a new question.
It's the same hand.
Same hand, that's okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Okay, just have a look at any other questions in here. So Kerry's asked, how does the scheme link to the other digital scheme launched by Scottish Government? Kerry, I'm assuming you maybe mean the work through education?
Sorry, yes. I can't do both. Yeah, the education one is the one particularly for me. I know there's a couple, but the education one is the one that I'm conscious that we need to link in with them.
Yeah, so I can take that. So we, and Alan also a bit, so we inside Scottish Government, we've worked closely with our policy colleagues in education. What we've done, we know that there's a potential crossover between the families with children and those who may be receiving a device through education. What we would say is that the education devices are very much focused on the needs of that learner and the stage that learner's at in their school, and so they may not be suitable for the use by the rest of the family. For example, some of them might have different sorts of management software installed, or different setups. So, and we also know that primarily the education devices are going to mostly to school children from 10 up to 18. So again, there's if it's a family with more than one child and perhaps only one device, the other children are perhaps preschool age, then it may be that there are some circumstances when a second device would be appropriate. I think in the guidance we've just asked that people are mindful that there is that that crossover, and but we're not saying that if a family of 4 has one device for one school child, that necessarily means they couldn't be involved. If they're genuinely in need and on a low income, that would still be appropriate. Alan?
Yeah, I broadly to agree with what you've said, but also I think an important point is that while they are 2 separate programmes, both are joint work between Scottish Government, local government and third sector as well. So we've been careful to make sure that there is as limited overlap as it can be, and to make sure that it works on a practical level. So we have put in place mechanisms to try and help that, even from the sort of strategic oversight for both programmes, having a degree of overlap, to ensure that it does operate smoothly. I think it's a slightly more holistic approach, has been mentioned, and sort of using common sense is where we can. But I think that if there are issues arising surrounding sort of awareness and also how it works in practicality, it'd be really interesting and really helpful to get some reflections back on that as well.
And I suppose from a practical basis, I think this is where sometimes you won't know the reality until you identify the specific individuals and go out and speak to them and say, do they want the support? So that's where it is kind of flexible. If you apply for 100 devices and outline your needs, there will be then flexibility to respond to, actually this family didn't need it and therefore we'll allocate to someone else, or you're splitting up the MiFi devices. So we trust the organisations that you're the people that you work with, and you'll be able to find the best way to use the kit that you get, even if it doesn't work out exactly as clean as you said in an application.
Just to flag on the back of that, Craig's just popped a comment in the chat just to say that there's another one for community learning and development organisations supported by Learning Link Scotland and Lead Scotland to support community learning. So anyone who's not aware of that, just to flag that. Thank you, Craig. I think possibly the last question, I'm on by YouthLink as well. Thank you, Kerry. The last question that I've got, so looks like, does Connecting Scotland get information on a recipient's usage or call history? Just thinking about information governance and GDPR and whether privacy notice accompanying the issuing of the devices, if there's sharing of information on usage.
So yes, there's a privacy notice that goes out with the devices. The kind of user is asked to, as part of the condition, they have to sign up to it, and that includes them sharing their basic personal information with SCVO and the Scottish Government, but it's just the basic kind of personal information, demographics stuff. SCVO, we have the contracts with Vodafone essentially. All we can see though is the billing details, and this is again covered in the privacy notice, so we can tell how much data they've used, but not what websites that they've visited. And another thing that's worth saying is, the data with Vodafone is covered by a basic content filter. So it's for families, and you shouldn't be able to get access to pornography through it, although it is just a basic one. So some sites, it's not a comprehensive family filter, it's just an adult content filter. So for example, you can get on some gambling sites like the lottery, but you shouldn't be able to get on a pornography 18+ rated sites.
Thanks, David. And a follow-up question from Kerry around, are devices limited to 1 per household?
We haven't specified that they are, and I suppose this is kind of loops back to the taking a common, the common sense approach to how you engage. If it's a very large very large family, for example, or a multi-generation family where perhaps an older person in the household had received an iPad during phase 1. But we wouldn't be expecting multiple applications for multiple devices for a household. But if there's an exceptional circumstance, which is because of the nature of the household or the specific needs of one person there, as I think it would be, there's no ban on it, but again, it's just that what makes sense, and you would need to be able to explain why that was an appropriate thing to do. Probably kind of links back to the bit about the schools scheme as well, where the school's device is given, is loaned to the pupil very much with the educational purpose in mind, which will mean they might be taking it to school, but actually, mum or dad or a carer needs a device at home for jobs, network, and whatever.
Yeah, and again, I think the outcome that we're trying to achieve through this is about the family digital inclusion. So it's not, in a household digital inclusion, it's not about providing individual, like one-to-one devices, which would be for learning, which would be the kind of educational piece. So again, it's up to people's discretion whether that means, a large family, it's appropriate to hand out to. And I think we trust people again to use that discretion and balance the reach and the practicalities of just one device shared between a large family not being suitable.
Awesome. One other question's just come in. Do devices come with relevant software, e.g. antivirus? So the devices don't come with kind of any additional kind of antivirus software. Part of, I think, the decision making around, amongst other reasons for the iPads and the Chromebooks, was the kind of inbuilt security features that already exist within the operating systems for both Google and Apple. But what we do have as well is some supplementary webinars around online safety that kind of touches on how a digital champion might explore themes around online safety as well with end users, and they're on the Connecting Scotland website, so they're worth looking at. I know there are some quite good free antivirus software things you could download.
So yeah, basically for antivirus specifically, Chromebooks and operating system and iPads don't require antivirus because they run kind of apps like your phone does. So you don't require antivirus like you would on another type of device. And both the Chromebooks and iPads have access to the app stores where they can download the relevant apps. And we provide guidance on what the people's starting point apps, the free ones they want to use.
Perfect. I don't think there are any outstanding questions in the chat pane. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? No? Perfect. If you do, you can always ping an email to us at help@connecting.scot, and we will answer your questions through there as well. We'll pop the recording of this webinar on the connecting.scot website, so you can reference back or share with colleagues. But yeah, thank you all for coming along, for asking questions and participating. Thanks to Eileen and Alan and David and Katie for answering questions as well. And I think that's us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, Aaron. Bye.
Bye.